If we could get everybody to take a seat, we'll get started, please, so we can stay on time. Going through the roll, all of our committee members are present, so we definitely have a quorum here, which I think has been a problem through the day with the bad weather and everything. I just want to say thanks to everybody for getting out in the weather and being here. Glad we're all here safe. I know there's some...
You may want to pull that mic a little bit closer.
Some nasty things going on around the state, so everybody just be careful while you're here and don't let anything ugly happen. First thing I want to do is say, again, another thank you to all of the committee members. We, of course, also had selections for committee members for the next year. We had one committee member that's going off of the committee, and I almost hate to give this to her because I hate to see her not be on the committee anymore. Stacy Gregory has been a trooper. She completes every task she's ever been assigned, and she always does it very, very completely. So, Stacy, I have a letter here that's signed by Chief Riley, the chair of GTAC, and want to add my heartfelt thanks to you for serving on this committee, and we hope you'll come back and join us again. I know you'll be here, and I have a certificate for you. We do have our new committee members appointed. They will take the table at our February meeting. There's an orientation, I believe, tomorrow afternoon that hopefully they'll get to attend, and then everybody, of course, has to do their open meeting records training. So be sure you get that done. But thank you for all that applied, and we will welcome our new members in February. So the first thing on our agenda is a report on the progress of the formation of the Air Medical Work Group to participate in EMTF at possible development of an air medical task force for our disaster response team for the Memorandum of Understanding or Agreement. For those of you that don't know, we have been working on a Memorandum of Agreement for the air medical services in the state for several years, and with the as infrequently as we meet, even though it's every quarter, it's still so difficult to get anything done. Anytime there's a language change on anything, it just has to go back and forth, and it just causes delay after delay after delay after delay. So actually, Eric Epley approached me a couple meetings ago, I guess, and we talked about the possibility of doing the Emergency Medical Task Force to help with this process. We talked about it in our Texas Ames meeting, and we've worked on this through that committee or group some. Eric's going to talk to us all just a little bit about what the task force will be, and the benefits of going this route.
Thank you, Shirley. So thanks for letting me talk just for a second. EMTF has been expanding some in the last year and a half. So we started off with the ambulance strike teams, obviously the ambuses. You guys have seen that program. the MMU, the field hospital component, and the RN strike teams are really kind of starting to come together. Two pieces that we've added recently were the medical incident support teams, which we've had those, but they were centrally controlled. Now we're putting those under the control of the EMTF program completely, and the ambulance staging managers, which is sort of logical. We had the ambulance strike teams, but we didn't have the ambulance staging managers tucked up underneath the EMTF. So we've done those two processes this year. And the next step, several of the air medical programs, I think we talked about this last meeting, had approached the state coordination office and asked if we would consider putting the air med assets, at least on state deployments, tucked up underneath the EMTF role as well. So we're going to do that. DSHS is excited about that. You guys have asked, I say you guys, the big programs have asked that we try to do that with one MOA, and we're going to do that. DSHS has agreed to that, to do it through the state coordination office, which right now STRAC is the EMTF SCO. Okay, so we will do one MOA between any and all air medical, either rotor or fixed wing. And so that would include, obviously, the airframes, total reimbursement for the personnel, including backfill, and any ancillary costs. The way those MOAs work, if you're not aware, basically you track your costs and you can file on those. If you fly a patient, any revenue you get from that offsets your total costs. So if your costs outweigh the revenue, we pay the delta. If the revenue, eclipses the cost, no blood, no foul. So we're good. And so we think that will be an effective model that will keep you whole. Our goal is to make sure the air medical providers in our state can respond quickly and rapidly and not have sort of the same benefits that the ambulance providers basically have had this entire time. We discussed at Thames last night as well. I will have meetings with the CEOs/program director leaders from each program in the next week or 2 weeks or so. Maybe phone calls. But I want to get their commitment first to understand. My sense is that some of them will want to participate, others will delegate that to kind of an operational leader, and so I'll let them make those decisions and appoint those people to the EMTF Air Medical Working Group. And Steve Solis has worked with Thames and with you guys over the past probably 4 years, and we've got some work already done that's exciting we can leverage, but we have a lot more to do yet. And so I'd like to get this MOA thing off the table. Let's just get that solved, make sure you guys are comfortable with that, and then let's get to the real work, which is figuring out how to work effectively together. That's pretty much it. Any questions?
Any questions for Eric?
All right.
No, and I said in the Thames meeting, we've worked on this for so long, and so thanks for the short road, and I think we can probably get there pretty quickly now.
We're excited to have the air medical component and round out EMTF. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, second on the agenda is a report on the Trauma Systems Committee Registry Work Group and their work with the RACs, or with RAC-D, on identifying issues with the trauma registry. Tracy.
So this is still an active work group. One of the things that they've identified is we've gotten feedback from the users for the trauma registry, and they are implementing and addressing the needs, the educational needs. Education seems to be one of the biggest needs that we've had out there on how to navigate the system, how to troubleshoot it effectively and efficiently, and so we are actively working toward that. One of the things that we've identified is the need for a trauma registry champion, possibly one for EMS and one for hospitals, like two separate individuals. And what we've done is come up with, we're giving feedback to Jane as far as qualifications and desired traits that we would like to see in those type of people, so that when they're a champion for this and helping with the education and whatnot, that we make sure we have the right folks in there. And that was probably the biggest thing that we've come up with so far. So again, I want to encourage you, especially from the air medical side, if you guys identify needs, if the trauma registry is not meeting your needs, if you need assistance with navigating it, with getting data in or out of it, all of that, then please get in touch with me. And while I am no expert, I am certainly happy to get you in touch with the folks that can help you with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Any questions for Tracy? The third item on our agenda is a report or discussion on allowing emergency medical services students to complete training clinical rotations in other states, and the questions that were sent to DISHES for clarification. Those okay. The questions were sent and the questions were actually sent on some other items, which we have the answers to. We'll continue to work on the students and some clarification or maybe some possibilities of what we can do to help those students get their clinical rotations completed. I think the EMS committee is working on that so that we will just, try to assist them in any way we can on those issues.
Shirley?
Yes, sir.
Just so you know that I've met with with Oklahoma and some other state directors, and we're just talking right now in concept to see where we could or could not do this with out-of-state students. And then we got to meet with the legal departments and go through all that kind of stuff. So, we've had an initial meeting that went really well and initial concepts. And then we just got to start working on all the legal stuff. So there'll be more to follow on that. But I just wanted to tell you that it hasn't been lost within the office.
Perfect. So Oklahoma so far?
Yeah, I've spoken with New Mexico, Oklahoma. Louisiana has a new director coming on, so we got to wait till that person's in place, and I haven't spoken to the Arkansas person yet.
Very good. Thank you so much. The next item on our agenda is a discussion/presentation of the language drafted at the year medical meeting held October the 3rd. That was an extra meeting, a special meeting that we held in Austin to go over the items that were not covered by our draft rules in the model state guidelines. We had worked on our draft rules for a good long while. And thank goodness we had Alicia, because she has really stayed after them and completed all of the changes and everything. When the model state guidelines came out, of course, the draft was sent to DISHES, and then it was, I guess, pretty much tabled there for a while, waiting on the model state guidelines to be published. Those guidelines were published, and for any of you that don't know where to find them, I know they're on the Ames website. There are probably other places as well. We took the model state guidelines and compared our draft of the rules to the model state guidelines just to see where we fit, how they fit, and actually discovered in that process that there were a few things that were covered by the model state guidelines that were not included in our draft. But for the most part, we felt like our draft was more comprehensive in some very important areas. So our quest here, I guess, is to continue on with the draft of the rules that we sent to the state. We visited with Jane about the possibility of adding to that draft since it hasn't had any movement since we sent it to the state. So we had the special meeting to draft language to cover those items that were not covered in our draft, that were covered in the model state guidelines that we felt like needed to be included in our draft. So that's what we're going to talk about. We spent the better part of a day, I guess, going through these items. So we have them for you. And we're just going to go through, these items that, just the items that we discussed, and so that everybody can see them. And then we'll take any comments.
Okay, wonderful. The gap analysis has been out there for probably 9 months or so at multiple meetings. I do have about 15 hard copies at the front of the room for those who'd like to have a hard copy. Same thing with the model state guidelines. Again, it's been posted on our agenda before. It is online, but there are about 15 hard copies in the front, and there are about 15 hard copies of this, kind of where we are with the rule, if you would like to have that. In fact, Tom. When we were going back through in August, there was some general cleanup or some expansion in the different areas, just to add titles to different sections to make it a little bit easier for DSHS to flow through. So you'll see that each section A, B, C, D all now have titles in there. There was a little bit of cleanup done on just how it was flowing as well. When we look at the gap, nope, not that one. Sorry, that one is sideways. When we looked at the gap, like Shirley said, we did find that for the most part, what we had built to begin with as a stakeholder group was much more inclusive, and there were certain things that were found that maybe we should look at to see if we wanted to address. And those 13 items were a definition and acronyms page, because we had not put forth that to update definitions. We don't have a list of those yet. We did work on a draft of those probably 5 or 6 years ago. And once we get the language down, we can definitely go back through and look at the definitions and acronyms and make sure we pull out what we have kind of at the end. The next thing was some professional and personal liability insurance requirements, some verbiage in subscriptions, that if you're providing subscriptions as a service, that the name of the most medically appropriate provider, that was quoted out of the model state guidelines. The most medically appropriate provider was actually listed on your verbiage when you were selling it. The fourth item that we saw was the demonstration of financial resources when you start up a company, and when you're working through that, you can demonstrate that you have the resources to run that company. Patient privacy considerations were addressed in more detail than what we had done. Detailed access to service clause was also within the model state guidelines. And they looked at a little bit different frequency of review of standards. Ours are every 4 years. Theirs were at least 7. Let's see. They did address circumstances in which one medical team member could possibly transport the patient instead of having both providers on board. A medical equipment list, including a ventilator and waveform and tidal CO2. They readdressed the 95th percentile, which we apparently had a little bit older standard in there. Bariatric patients, multiple patient transport, and integration into the ICS system. We got through most of those and thoughts and considerations. And I think it's probably going to be easier because they lie in different sections here to scroll through. Anything in red were things that were added. And then we can talk about some things that were on the table and we discussed and decided that maybe those considerations weren't right for us as a state. So in our administration and oversight, I believe nothing changed. These were just the things that you need to present to the state, you know, your FAA certificate, things like that, associated fees. So nothing within that section changed. It still did require a site visit, similar to a CAME site visit. It talks about the possible people that could be on that site visit team, and looking at the initial records, things like that. So again, B was just a cleanup there. As we go into our second section, this was where we addressed hiring and credentialing of personnel, going through competencies, initial training, retraining if needed, credentialing by the medical director, that the medical director is involved, how to accommodate if there were the ability for a third rider or if there was not the ability for a third rider during training, but all of that has remained the same. It was consistent or more defined than the model state guidelines, the way it was initially written. Same thing with the initial training required. Please feel free to stop me if you want to look at it. We're on page 6 with the professional development, which is our section C. Talks about training requirements, making sure that the professional development is done at least semi-annually, at least 50% is in person. And again, it gives a list of minimum subject matters that should be reviewed annually. And then it talks about outreach development. This is what we do with hospitals, what we do with EMS or fire department, making sure that's clearly defined. And this is where we see the first change. Model state guidelines really went into a little more detail regarding what some of that training should look like. It should include emergency procedures, how to access and egress the helicopter, how to safely operate it, how to safely shut down. And so the thought was that verbiage should be placed in there. It was a good idea to make sure that those things were taught. Also training on how to utilize the air medical asset appropriately. And this goes back to a lot of our conversations before about appropriate air medical utilization and making sure we're reviewing with people so that they understand, yes, this patient actually came out of triage before we finished our report, or they were seriously injured and this was the follow-up on them. And then the documentation of that training under CE. Any questions regarding the addition of that? And that was all that was added to that section. So cleaned up the helicopter shopping a little bit, talked about any mode of aviation, so not just helicopter shopping, although that is the term, but fixed wing providers run into the same problem of the shopping around. So. Moving on, we had protocol administration and oversight, and there really was no changes within that section. Just that your committees drove your protocols, research, education, drove those with your medical director. Operational standards. We had a little discussion about the 95th percentile because that does seem to change, here and there, and should we really put the actual weight on there? This has to do with carrying patients. Just like with ambulances, not every patient will fit into an ambulance. Not every patient fits into an airframe. But there should be some minimums of what can fit. So let's see. So we talked about the manufacturer guidelines and the maximum weight that can be provided. That's on that little 3 icon right above where it was deleted. And the conversation was we felt that all of the stretchers that are currently manufactured for aviation use all at least carried the minimum of the 95th percentile as defined now, as defined before. And so in the end, we took out the 95th percentile and left the inclusion about the stretcher requires the stretcher, because those stretchers do allow for those patients to be carried. Yes, sir.
So on the conversation about the weight minimal for a patient, is that discussed anywhere else in the document since that has now been contracted?
It doesn't have a physical weight. So it doesn't say, and I believe the model state guidelines, I don't remember what it said, it was like almost 220 pounds now instead of the 212, or maybe it was 230 instead of the 212. So it was well below kind of what people are currently transporting. You know, if you have any ideas about how that could be written so it would be seamless as that number changes. So, and the ability not only to elevate the head was there, but that the patient had to be able to be supine as well, which apparently we had left out there. I think it was implied, but again, it didn't make it into the first documentation.
Hey, Alicia.
Yes.
So the model state guidelines actually state 6 feet and 232 pounds in the 95th percentile is what the model state guidelines specify for the stretcher.
Okay. So it remains 6 feet, then that was unchanged from before. It's just gone up to 232 pounds?
Right.
Okay. Sean, do you think it's indicated to write it in there to physically have a foot length and weight?
I'm debating it, so.
Okay, we can always come back to it as you're working through it. Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I just turned over to page 13 where you have a statement that the unusual size has to include weight and size.
Right, and he was speaking of, if you couldn't hear him, on page 13, there is some bariatric or unusual size patient recommendations, whether they be, you know, extremely short and overweight, or whether they be extremely tall or bariatric patients. Yes, there are some provisions farther down that we'll go over that were added for that. Okay, so with the 2 patient transports, the model state guideline was more inclusive, that if you were going to transport 2 patients, you had to do so in a way that would not compromise the patient's airway, their stabilization, or the ability to do any emergency procedure on that patient, including CPR. So that was added on there. And that, I think that was pulled almost directly out of there, word for word.
Mm-hmm.
The next section that we got to was N-Title CO2. The way it was originally written by us is that we had to have a method to monitor exhaled carbon dioxide. The way it's specifically written in the model state guidelines is that had to be continuous N-Title CO2 on intubated patients. Waveform number included that it could not be like an easy cap or some sort of color changing device, which was what was kind of allowed or indicated in our initial wording. And so the thought was that that was in line with standard of care right now for air medical providers. And that was changed over to a continuous N-Title monitoring. So in our admin and oversight, which was section F, let me pull this to the top of the screen so it's easier to see. This was the unusual unusual size. So we have a policy that addresses it. It's not stated specifically there, but hopefully in your public education, you be educating people on what that is so that they know when they call, or through your communication center, asking those good questions when they may fall out of range of those sizes. Any questions regarding the size? In the comms section, there was some good conversation about how lengthy the Model State Guidelines comms section is. They took it directly out of some national recommendations from flight communicators, and they had a very extensive list in there of education and how to address that. Most of the people in attendance at the meeting felt that the way our comms was written was appropriate, with adding a few little things here or there, and that maybe that extensive list did not belong in here per se, but that we had covered most of the intent of it within the rule. Not sure how we missed that the first time, but the post-incident accident plan in place, writing that down. Sometimes the most obvious things escape us as we're writing things. And that was added to one of the requirements for the comm center. And again, we do have a list here of some education for basic education. And we also added, which was within the Model State Guidelines as well, that they be part of your AMRAM training, your Air Medical Resource Management, things like that. Maybe we missed that. It was probably on the next page. So we have it there on number 9 on line 494, written. And that's actually part of the training. So maybe this up here address the written policies. So it's in the policies and then repeated again in the training section. Any questions regarding the comm center and communication center requirements? For lack of better terminology, we labeled the next section work environment, and this has to do with having adequate place to do flight planning, rest quarters, things like that. Safe storage for oxygen, safe storage for your biohazard. There was some cleanup in how things were written there. And there was really no change in that section at all. I believe safety remained the same as well. Although, I mean, we spent an extensive time on communications. We did talk a little bit about the safety and the moving over, and this is kind of where we were winding down our meeting right here. So we'll finish up and go through. There's a few little other things, and then see if we can't get any comment. We obviously have a little bit bigger stakeholder group here, and I'd love to hear some comments from the stakeholder group. So quality improvement added the non-punitive design into the QI process. The committees did not change. Those were as inclusive, if not more inclusive. And this section didn't end up on another page, but it will soon with a title. And this is basically, you know, if you're walking in and you're trying to obtain licensure as an air medical provider, you have to have at least addressed all of the different sections in some way. Even if you come up a little bit short, you may get a provisional license while you're working on getting those up to speed. And then also some absolute, this is kind of what the EMS committee is working on as well with the, you know, you can't run a business if you've been convicted of violating the law regarding abuse, kickbacks, things like that. And that is the end of the updates to that document. This document, when we completed it, was 2010, I believe. Was, I believe, November of 2010 EMS conference. These were the updates based on the model state guidelines. Like I said, not everything absolutely made it in, but it was discussed. Had some good discussion regarding it. Shirley?
I'm sorry, what? Discussion?
Yeah, discussion from anybody. It's an extensive list, and for those who were not with us during that process, you know, in 2004 we had looked at bringing CAMES online as our state standard, and through several discussions with legal and different things that couldn't happen, and so from there we worked on a process that might look like CAMES, but take some of those aviation components out of there that we could not write rule on as a state. And then take into consideration some of the things that are unique to our state, that we're medical director driven. We do not have a state medical director, you know, and how involved that person needs to be within a program, especially when you're doing critical interventions that are low frequency, maybe high risk interventions, and the kind of training and involvement that needs to be in a program like that. And this is what the stakeholder group came up with. So CAMES would be, as part of this recommendation, a deemed status. So if you were CAMES certified, which you can become before you open up, you can get a provisional CAMES license. If you are CAMES certified, that would be deemed status. Does anybody have any questions, thoughts?
Like Alicia said, this has been a long, hard process, and we have hopefully gathered input from everybody that had any to offer. I don't think we want to have, 40 more meetings on this until we get something done. But certainly, it has been a long, arduous process. I think we will take these recommendations to the council, let them know that we have completed the draft revisions, and we'll be taking those back to the council probably at the February meeting after we've had time to get through and make sure that they're all as we want them, and we'll take them to the council so that we can pass them on to dishes at the February meeting. So if anybody has any comments on these, let us know. And certainly if you have any right now.
Is there a deadline for them? A deadline for them to respond? Like
For
comments, feedback? Do we need, because I know we need to post it and...
We will have to have the documents to the GTAC Council at least 30 days before our next meeting, I think would be a fair statement. And then we will also try to get these posted online this next time. Joe, is that 30 days? Is that to get it to the council before the next meeting?
Yeah. Yes. And just keep in mind that these are proposals coming over to us. There's a whole lot of review through that formal process too. Yeah. Just to bring up the speed that since we've been kind of putting this off and all the work's not lost, we have it in the office from the other committees as well as this committee. As soon as we get to the holidays here, Jane has really tasked me with getting the new rules rewritten. all the stuff that's been going on. So we've been really focused on 15711 because it's Senate Bill 8 and 3556. So we're going to be opening up those new rules early next year and start drafting and making all those changes. And I would assume we'll use the same process. We'll go out and have stakeholder meetings around the state to get consensus so that when we do start pushing them forward, we have approval. We don't have people throwing things at us. I would still suspect that there's going to be a lot of changes coming. I would suspect it's going to take 2 years to get from point A to final. I know you guys have been waiting a long time to get this done, but it makes no sense to keep piecemealing it. We need to go in and clean up a whole lot of stuff.
Sure, understand. And actually, when we were going through this a little while ago and we were talking about the demonstration of financial resources, one of the things that I just looked at, I guess that would probably be covered in our new rule, right?
Yes.
So with the letter of credit and the surety bond. So that's one extra piece we don't have to worry
you
about.
don't have to worry about it. And we want to make sure that it all is hand in glove as we go forward here so that we don't have to just keep repeating things.
Sure.
So I think your timing could not be any better. You're on the right track to get it right into the first draft. We're going to draft it first in the office with all the input from the other committees before we even come out. If we come out with a blank piece of paper, we'll be here 5 years from now. So we have to give you something to work with and to massage it and get it right. So we're going to take the first whack at it, get it right, do the best that we can, and then come out. And just look at 15711. We came out in August with some recommendations, and we heard the input. We were able to change it and get it into the process that was approved last week with the council. So that'll come out to public comment again. There might be some more tweaking, but it really helped on moving the whole process forward. We don't have people lining up, throwing things at us or complaining about it.
Sure. Well, and the whole draft started. Cames does not want because of the legal issues, lawsuits, and the expense to them every time they have a denial, I guess, of an accreditation for a program that's in a state that you have to have Cames accreditation to operate. Seems like they get a lawsuit filed against them. So they don't want states using just Cames accreditation for state licensure. The Cames standards is basically what we started with when we started writing the draft. We wanted to make sure that we were covering the areas that they cover, and especially the ones that we felt were the most important. Then the model state guidelines. If you read through the model state guidelines, you'll see that they are very similar to the Cames standards. So I think all in all, we probably have a document, a draft anyway, that's pretty cohesive with the model state guidelines. So there's not going to be, if you have the deemed status state licensure through Cames accreditation, or going through the state survey process, either one, I think it's all going to be very similar when it all shakes out and we get all of this finished.
And I don't think it's good legislation to set your standards on somebody else. Because, not to say Cames would do that, but if they went up high to the left and it was something really against the direction we were trying to go.
Right.
So, you make statements like based on national standards or something to that, but you don't ever really want to name somebody in it. And I can understand their position too.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, absolutely. And I think, there are, I guess, a number of states that are looking to use the model state guidelines as their state standards for licensure. I know that's one of the issues that we're running into in New Mexico, because New Mexico is a state that the rule is that you have to have Cames accreditation for state licensure. We're in the process of looking at new rules for New Mexico also, and hopefully we can work with the model state guidelines. That'll also give us some cohesiveness across the state lines.
Sure.
Because there are a number of programs that go back and forth. So it'll help us keep from being confused with with the state rules. So I think all in all, you know, at the end of the day, we'll end up with something that's very good, and covers all the things that we feel are important to be covered. So,
If you could send me this electronically, that would just help too, instead of just a piece of paper. And I realize that it hasn't been approved through the GTAC approval process and all that
Right.
kind of stuff. But if we start working on it, I mean, we can still start including this kind of stuff. And it's a whole lot easier. I can just paste and cut than try to retype it. You should see me type. It's really pretty ugly.
we'll get that to you, sure.
Thanks.
Shirley, I would propose maybe giving our stakeholders a deadline early January, maybe January 6th or something like that, for comments and feedback, so that we can be sure to get them drafted in there and be able to, you know, forward this to the GTAC committee for the February meeting, so that there's not an additional delay, if that sounds reasonable. I don't know how much time you need to get it added, you know, if there's something that we decide.
If there were suggestions, they could probably just be compiled into a list, you know, an itemized list, and then
Discuss it at the
bring
meeting.
forth anything that we approved today, bring forth an itemized list of concerns that were brought forth, and then if there were any changes, they could be made, and then
At the meeting.
anew at the meeting.
So, I don't know that we need a motion. We voted on the changes. No, we didn't have a quorum, did we, at our October meeting?
Right before the end of our meeting, we were about to lose our quorum.
We did.
Yeah.
Yes, so we've already voted on the draft changes. So I guess I would ask then, since I need to get agenda items in, they have to be submitted in a timely manner. I guess I would ask maybe a deadline of January 7th, and that will give me time to compile a list. Send those, if you have any comments, questions, suggestions, send them either to myself, send them to Alicia, and we'll get the list compiled together and then bring those back for the next meeting in February.
And if anybody else would like the digital copies, like I said, there's plenty of hard copies left up front. If you'd like the digital copies, I'll make sure to forward them on to Shirley, and she or I can.
And we actually
them
can
to
send
anybody.
those, yeah, we can send them to Dishes and get those put on the website, on the GTAC documents, so that they'll be there so you can review them if you choose to do so. Anything else? All right. Alicia, thanks for all of your record keeping, your rule keeping. We will now open the floor for general public comment. I know Jim has a report on the Thames Golf Tournament.
I was asked by Brock, the golf tournament guru, to kind of report on the Thames Golf Tournament that we had this past Friday. I'm sure that everybody's aware that all the proceeds raised at the golf tournament go to the EMS Hall of Honor. This year's golf tournament, unfortunately, the tournament itself at the golf course was canceled by the golf course due to weather. Brock spent 5 or 6 or 10 hours working feverishly to reschedule us to a Top Golf shooting range over in Dallas. We turned out to be very successful. The golf tournament itself, through sponsors and teams, raised almost $18,000 clear profit for the EMS Hall of Honor. That does not include the silent auction that's happening in the hall the next 2 days, so stop by and bid on something. I know that this year they're honoring 3 line of duty deaths, 1 which will be present, and that individual family's funds coming into the tournament, to the luncheon and awards is paid for through that process. So.
And the proceeds, yeah, like Jim said, the proceeds are to help those families attend the Hall of Honor ceremony that happens during the awards luncheon. So, you know, oftentimes that's such a difficult time anyway, but finances can certainly be a problem sometimes. So that's what those funds are being used for, is to help with airfare, mileage, hotels, meals, any of those things that we can help them with. So I would encourage you all to watch for next year's golf tournament. I think they're going to try to do it at another Top Golf facility. I was not familiar with Top Golf facilities. We don't have one in my part of the world. But it sounded to me like they had an awesome time. And I didn't get to be here to play either, but it sounded like they had an awesome time. They were outside, but yet they were undercover, so nobody got wet. But they still got to be outside, and you could eat and have an adult beverage if you wanted to while you were playing golf. And no one was driving over anybody else on golf carts or anything else, since they're not there. Really sounded like a good time, so would encourage you all to watch for that for next year. And apparently this is one of those kind of golf courses that you don't have to even be a good golfer to play and have a good time. So maybe we'll have an even larger participation next year. The silent auction is over with the Texas Ames booth, and I know I saw several tables full of good things over there, so I would encourage you all to go by and look. And that's going to be open until 5 o'clock tomorrow?
Open till 5 tomorrow, at which point we will start texting people to come pick up their stuff.
Okay.
And a special thank you to all the people who donated for the silent auction, gift baskets, and there's a leather jacket over there. There's all sorts of stuff. So a special thank you to everybody who donated for that process.
But I've already got the winning bid on the diamond watch.
You probably shouldn't say that on a tape line.
Okay. Joe, do you want to just briefly let everybody know where we are on the list of questions that we turned into the state?
Sure. I've provided the answers to you from the office right before the meeting started. It's taken a little bit of a while to get you the answers, but please look at them, and then maybe before the next meeting, Shirley, you, Jane, and I can sit down and just discuss them, so that in case you have any other additional questions, and then we can discuss it with the whole committee at the next meeting. Perfect.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I just make a really quick comment here. I don't know. I know Joe has been very busy going around the state, having stakeholder meetings on different items, looking at the areas, since he's not a native Texan, but he's one of those that got here as fast as he could. So, but anyway, we had the pleasure of giving him a little tour around the more frontier part of the state. And luckily the weather cooperated that day. You know, I just want to say thanks, Joe, for doing what you're doing and getting out and talking to the stakeholders and looking at things the way you have been.
It's really been my pleasure, and truly I have no control over the weather that's outside. I thought I was running away from it, not coming to it. But it's the warm welcome to Texas has been outstanding. So I am now a property owner in Texas, and the family's finally coming together. And my poor wife just emailed me that she's suffering in Key West right now at 86 degrees and it's sunny, just in case you wanted to know. And there's just something wrong with that.
Yeah, you know, no jury would convict you here. Okay. Yes, sir.
Just a quick question on those responses that you gave, Joe. There was a work group that was working on those, which was comprised of your group and the EMS group. and part of the medical directors. Is those answers going to be shared with that group so we can look at them too, or is it just solely going to this committee?
So that's truly up to the committee. The questions came to us from the Air Committee, and I can send it to you, the answers electronically. It's up to you.
No, we absolutely will share them.
Okay, sure.
Absolutely, we'll share them.
Yes, of course, yes.
Okay, yep, I'm sorry. Roberta will send them out to that distribution list, to that work group. She has the distribution list.
Thank you.
So, but thanks for bringing that up.
I can send you, unless you have a laptop, I have them here on a thumb drive. I can give it to you electronically too.
Okay.
Eddie Walker with Life EMS Academy in El Paso. First thing I want to do is thank the committee for their interest and their support for the out-of-state rotations for paramedic students or all EMS students. Second thing I want to do is just give you an update on what's happened since the last GTAC meeting. About a week after the last GTAC meeting, which I asked the state to grant an exemption so that my military paramedic students could go into New Mexico to be able to do rotations, DSHS did grant me that exception. In negotiating or going forward with the New Mexico Bureau of EMS, I hit a roadblock that was insurmountable for that time frame for this paramedic class. And that roadblock is this. The state of New Mexico requires that any paramedic student that comes into New Mexico to do rotations come from one, an accredited paramedic program, or one seeking accreditation. Okay, that's us, we fit that. The second thing that they require is that all students coming from out of state must have a state certification from their state, whether they come from Texas, Alaska, Michigan, Hawaii, wherever. They have to have that. None of my military students have that. Something that I can do in the future for other military classes is that I can take care of that problem by having them come in early, fill out the Texas application, have them do the fast fingerprint, send everything in so that within a couple of months after they start that 6-month class, by the time they're ready to start doing rotations, then they should have their Texas certification, and I can ask for another exception and hopefully get those folks into New Mexico, because that is our biggest problem right now, is the ambulance rotations in that area. But when they told me that they have to have a state certification and that they do not recognize the National Registry certification as a license to practice, it made me think about our own rules, 15732, in which it says that for an advanced program or an advanced student, whether that's advanced EMT or paramedic, that they must have a state of Texas or National Registry certification prior to the beginning of clinicals. The New Mexico state wants these folks to have this state certification so that their state has regulatory authority over them and disciplinary authority in case something should happen during patient care on one of their rotations. We have students that come from other states into Texas to do rotations. I've had students in the past from Alaska. And it's a concern that some of the educators and I have had, is that without having a state certification, DSH has no regulatory authority over those folks whatsoever. Because the National Registry certification is just saying you've passed this test, you've passed these skills, and we all know that the state licensure is that authority to practice. When I mentioned this to the EMS Education Committee yesterday, I asked that they consider that we look at that 15732 and consider revising that rule and taking out the part that says or National Registry certification, and simply state that all students, all advanced students, must have a state certification and recognize that state certification regardless of what state it is, but that they have that. This affects my military students in the El Paso area, but it can definitely have a big impact on students that are along the rest of the borders of Texas. Thank you.
Yep.
And we'll have to take that into consideration, because also understand, if we say that, the military people that come into our state that are nationally registry can't get reciprocity into Texas if we say you have to have state certification. So we're going to look at that whole issue. As I said earlier in this meeting, we're meeting with the other states to try to work some of those details out. I think from Joe Schmieder's standpoint, I think the issue is not so much the student, because the student should be operating under a preceptor. And I think the answer here is you hold the school responsible. And I don't think it's anything different than an intern or a resident coming in from another state into this state to do some kind of clinical. So that's the model we're at least thinking, and we got to work this all out with the legal and all those kind of things. I don't think it's as hard as it might be when you first say it, but I also don't want to do something that's going to hurt the system in other areas. So we'll keep working this. It's going to take a little bit of time and work with legal to get it right between all the states. And I think it's a good opportunity for Texas to work with all of our neighbors to get this. I think we'll set a standard for other states too, and especially in the electronic world where people are doing classes online and traveling back and forth. You know, I had a discussion this morning with somebody and said, you know, we can't just bury our head in the sand and think it's going to go away, because it's only going to expand, and we got to figure this one out.
All right, and certainly with the shortages that we have, anything that we can do to reasonably help that process along and still maintain the quality of our students and those finishing, I'd be all in favor of. Any other general public comment?
Spare.
I think we're doing okay. They didn't start our clock over here today, so I've been sitting here looking at 90 minutes for the whole time, which is okay. Any other general comment? Going once? Twice? Okay. So for our next meeting, we'll have several things that we're going to bring back from this meeting. And then we'll be looking for some approval from the GTAC Council, I think, on the draft for our rules to send forth. And then they'll work through that process. Unless somebody has anything else, I have been through my agenda and I don't have any other items. We're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.